So here is our next card. So first of all, we're going to die cut our image out of glitter cardstock. Yes, you can die cut through glitter. This particular one is a nice, really thick and sturdy one. The only ones that I've ever found that you can't die cut out of, there's a thin one in the back of it, feels almost plasticky. It won't die cut. So most glitter papers that I've tried are super easy to die cut. So first thing we're going to do is tape our die to it, just like all the other ones. This particular one I am going to round, or I'm going to put the tape right around to the front, simply because we're doing this to glitter paper and there's not a lot of places for the tape to really grip. So by putting it around to the back of the cardstock, we're good. Anything that still sticks to the back, it's going to be glued down to something anyways. So here we go. So I'm going to run it through. And then I'm going to take a look at it. Now, glitter paper, just because it is a little bit thicker, sometimes there's areas that don't necessarily want to cut really well. So turn your die a quarter turn and then run it through again. It should get any of those missing places. Let's get the die or the machine out of the way. So for this particular one, we're going to use some ink blending brushes and some ink pads for the background to ink it. You could also use markers to color it. You could use watercolor paints to color the background. You could use whatever you want. I've done this before with Copics in the background, and I used kind of a vellum-y type cardstock, and it looked really, really pretty. And by doing it with Copics, it was very easy to blend. So it doesn't necessarily just have to be, sorry, I'm losing track of my train of thought by poking these things out. It doesn't necessarily just have to be pads and ink blending brushes. There's a lot of different ways that you can color in images. And if it's a background for like an all over background, you would choose, just depending on the image, as to which way you would want to color it. So I'm just going to poke all these out. I'm going to be quiet and I'm just going to fast forward a little bit so that save time a bit. All right, all our pieces are cut out of there or poked out of there. So I'm going to take a pencil and I'm just going to lightly mark where the different areas are. And that's just so that I can ink the right areas. I will get some yellow coming out from behind that lighthouse. In my mind, it's the light shining in the dusky morning or whatever. So I don't actually worry too much about that. So I'm gonna first do my lighthouse. And once again, you can, wrong one there. Once again, you can absolutely use markers for this. You'd be a little bit more precise when you're using markers. I just, by doing the pads, I kind of look like the blended misty morning feel to it. So now let's do the top here. Just going to get rid of the pads as I'm done with them. So I'm going to do the red for the very top of the lighthouse. And I'm just using a light touch with it. And then I'm going to do some gray rocks here. And when it comes to the gray rocks, I don't mind seeing stuff behind it poking out. To me, that kind of looks a little bit like water splashing. I found that especially true with the watercolor one. To me, that just kind of looked like something splashing up behind the rocks there. All right, now the sky part is the easiest part. So I'm just gonna double check here that I've got everything. I'm missing a rock there. So let's fill that back in. And by putting some little reference points there, it makes it easy to see what you've missed and whatnot. And you can easily just erase those before you glue your card together, if they're somewhere where you're seeing it and you don't like that. So I'm going to put some of this saltwater taffy right on the horizon. And I'm putting a little bit on the top of the water because if we've got a pretty sky, it's going to reflect on the water. So I want to see it. And now I'm going to use some of the light of my lighter blues. So I'm using Speckled Egg here. I think my brush has dried ink or something because it's stiffer than the other brushes. So I'm using regular Distress ink for this. If you decide, you can use Distress Oxide, and because Distress Oxide is a pigment ink, you'll end up having a little bit more of a creamier blend to your background, because that's not looking great right now. But once we finish it, it will be good. This is one of those things that without seeing it in context, it looks very odd. And in general, when you're doing ink blending with the brushes, less is more. So you want to start lighter and you want to build. Because I'm trying to do it within a time limit, I'm tending to press harder than I normally would, which is why the ink is getting a little bit darker. So there we go. I've got everything where I want it to be. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue this piece to my white piece there. This white piece is smaller than my glitter piece so that it hides behind it. If by chance I go put my piece on here and I like it better, say shifted down or whatever, I can just trim any excess off. I don't need to worry about it being perfectly placed. I've got a little bit of leeway there, and anything that pokes out can just be trimmed right off. You can see I got a little piece of cardstock there. Sometimes when you're die cutting, it doesn't necessarily always cut all the way through. And when I'm poking my pieces out, I poke them to the back so that if something is not cut and it accidentally rips, it rips on my back of the die cut piece. And 9.5 times out of 10, you don't even notice it on the front, because most of the time your die cuts get glued down. So you would actually hold this down a little bit longer just to make sure that glue has some good contact. But I'm going to finish the card here. And what I would actually do, the glitter cardstock, when you die cut it, sometimes it likes to stretch a little bit, especially with intricate dies, and all of these little bits and pieces that get cut out make it a little bit more intricate than most. So what I tend to do is I'll get a bigger stamping block and I'll go and put something heavy on top of it so that it will have some pressure on top of it so that it dries flat. But there we go. Our third card, third technique. Super simple again, but it's just really, really pretty. So we'll see you in the next video for our fourth and final technique.